Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I'm naturopath Fiona and I'm joined today by the beautiful Jessianna Saville from the Kidney Nutritional Institute again. She's been a regular feature on many of our videos. So if you haven't seen the fine work that is Jessianna, make sure you go back and have a look at some of our other videos. But she runs the Kidney Nutritional Institute and she's a wealth of knowledge. She is a renal dietitian and has been doing this for eons, and is very well versed in the latest research and all things kidneys and dietary related. So today we wanted to speak about anemia and iron deficiency and its correlation and how that fits in with kidney disease, because it's such a common symptom, I guess, that we see that people think is caused by kidney disease, but maybe that's actually not the case. So Jessianna, let me hand it over to you. And again, thank you for joining me and giving up your precious time to be here. I know how busy you are, so it's really appreciated.
It's good to be here. I'm going to close my door because otherwise there's going to be some noise. No, it's great to be here. This has been a topic on my mind, and then an article came out in one of the nephrology journals that I follow just this week about anemia. And then one of my practitioners would always say, like, it just seems like things come in waves. And she's like, man, all my patients have anemia. And so I think it's a timely topic because it's been really, really on my mind, and it's so important. And I always consider anemia as one of the easiest things to change that can make a big difference, but it's one of the most often overlooked.
100%. I find exactly the same thing. So especially too, I don't know about over in the States, but I'm often just looking at the ferritin levels. So someone's iron might be normal and we'll get to tests, but the ferritin might be really low and it just doesn't get flagged by the doctor because they're just looking at total iron versus ferritin. So, yeah. So why don't we start with what is anemia? What is iron deficiency? What does that look like and how would someone know that they've got that?
Great question. So anemia is characterized by not having enough red blood cells, essentially, not being able to oxygenate your red blood cells. Hemoglobin is the part. Oh, and I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead into test values. But if you can't, to simplify, if you can't oxygenate your tissues, right? Our red blood cells carry oxygen to all our tissues, among other things. And if you don't have enough, or if you don't have the right components on these red blood cells to carry oxygen, then your tissues are starving for oxygen, and that really prohibits healing. It prohibits, function. It's just a very critical part of overall health. I mean, all of us know what it is to take, a deep breath and how important air and oxygen and breath is to how we feel. And it's the same for all our organs. You have to have your blood to be able to carry it around.
So why is it that with kidney disease, we often are seeing anemia as being, we often think it's a symptom of, but I think some of these later studies are maybe saying that's not just the case. But why do we see that really more commonly in people with kidney disease?
I think there's a couple of reasons. So just physiologically, one of the hormones that our kidneys make that allows our body to make red blood cells, erythropoietin, one of these hormones, is produced in the kidneys. And so if your kidneys start declining, you may not produce as much of this anymore, which is one of the reasons. And so people can become anemic just because they're not producing as many red blood cells. That's, one functional reason. There can be other things, just such as the overall systemic inflammation that I think contributes to overall anemia. But the other thing that I see, which is not so much causation by the disease, it's just because of how people react to changing their lifestyle because of it, is a lot of people move towards very restrictive diets, especially very plant-heavy diets, which we're huge fans of plant-heavy diets. So I'm not dogging on them at all. We use them all the time. But if you move towards a very plant-heavy diet incorrectly, or maybe what you do is just stop eating meat, but you don't actually increase other things in your diet, that's the other place I see people becoming anemic, because they suddenly lose this huge mineral source in their diet, aka the meat, and they're not getting the nutrients that are needed to help produce red blood cells. The iron, the B vitamins, a lot of the minerals. And so I think that's one of the other things I see.
And what are sort of the symptoms that people would experience if they were anemic?
So the most common one that people will notice is just fatigue, just, kind of feeling worn down. Early on, people just be like, I'm just kind of tired, just kind of worn down. More severe symptoms can be brain fog, shortness of breath. Like you climb the stairs and you're like, oh man, I just have to catch my breath. Shortness of breath can be another one. Pallor. So I can see it. We work all virtually in our practice, but despite poor lighting or whatever, I can see it when my patients come in just on the pallor in their skin. If they're quite pale or they just look like almost gray, they just don't look vibrant and have color in their cheeks, then that would be another sign. People may notice like on their eye, if I was in person, that's something you can inspect, but in your eye, you can see down here the tissue, and if it's very, very pale, then that's another sign of anemia. So there can be a lot of things. People notice also in their fingernails. That's always one of the first places you'll see a deficiency, that their fingernails will spoon, like they'll kind of a spooning shape to them. And that can be a very, a much more severe sign of deficiency as well. So a lot of things, but the first one always is just tired, feeling kind of run down is the first thing that we notice.
And is there a correlation between anemia maybe making kidney disease worse, or well, we know, like I'm looking for which causal direction. So we were talking before that, because the kidneys produce EP, erythropoietin, that it can contribute to it. But I know that potentially, is it that anemia, is there a cycle there? Like if you're anemic, are you going to make your kidney disease worse? Is there any correlation between that? Like, is it important? Like if you had kidney disease, you've got so many things going on, why should I bother at looking at anemia, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah, super great question. There's a lot of things in kidney disease. It's like chicken or the egg, but it really is just feeding both ways, right? And anemia is that way. So yes, kidney disease can cause anemia, but guess what? Anemia can worsen kidney disease. It's not necessarily going to cause kidney disease, but if you have kidney disease, it's going to worsen it. And the paper that just came out that I was reading about is so interesting, but they had 5 million. They looked at 5 million cases.
Okay, so we're not looking at a small population here. We can say this was properly done.
5 million. I know when I read that, I actually went back and I read it. I was like, they said they looked at 5 million. Like that's a huge amount for any study just to look at number of patients. So 5 million patients from 2016 to 2019, and they pulled all the data and they were looking, endpoints on how anemia was impacting GFR decline, cardiac events, a whole bunch of other things. And they did see that there was definitely an association, not necessarily a causation, but I'll tell you why I think they're very linked and why for us, huge priority. But there's definitely a strong correlation between people who were more anemic and people having more GFR decline.
Oh.
Again, like it's hard to say causation, but on my side, I just think, geez, like if you're not, number one, if you're anemic, you 100% have some nutrient deficiencies, just period. I think I can make a very great assumption. You probably have some nutrient deficiencies, and that doesn't help any process in the body. But two, back to that oxygen perspective, if you're not oxygenating your tissues well, then yeah, it would totally make sense that they're not going to be as strong or resilient or decline faster. And so I just think, man, anemia is so, so important to tackle. The other thing that's really important here, we've seen this a couple times, is that blood pressure, which is such a huge hit on the kidney side, blood pressure. If you're anemic, severely anemic, and we've had a couple patients that until the anemia resolved, their blood pressure did not come down. And so just by that, in and of itself, if you don't take care of the anemia, I think it impacts other, factors that can cause decline as well.
That totally makes sense. So run me through the blood tests for anemia and what people are looking at on a panel, because I know we were talking about this earlier, but sometimes it gets missed because people are looking at the wrong thing. So if someone's like, well, I am tired and I've got, and I'm on a plant-based diet and I've got kidney disease, what do I need to ask my doctor to test for?
Great question. So I'm going to answer this in two ways, because I'm going to answer what's being looked at and also what's not being looked at. Because anemia is very much dismissed. So in the States, hemoglobin is probably the number one thing that is looked at for anemia. Wow. What's really interesting and what we've seen happen is that hemoglobin levels sometimes are being interpreted by the physicians or nurse practitioner, whoever is kind of calling the shots. They're being interpreted by dialysis standards. So patients on dialysis, often they're taking the hormone epogen, and if you're on epogen, you are purposely kept mildly anemic, because the research showed that if you have normal hemoglobin levels, you're more likely to have a cardiac event. So you're purposely kept slightly anemic. It's a real tough target. But sometimes our CKD patients get clumped into that group of people, even though they're not on epogen. And so they'll be aiming for like 10 to 11 on their hemoglobin levels, and we want to see 12 to 14. So hemoglobin is what is looked at first. If your hemoglobin is low, you're anemic, 100%. But you can be anemic and have a normal hemoglobin. And this is where it's really important to look a step deeper. So it's often dismissed. And again, I don't know what do they draw for you?
Well, yeah, if we do an iron study, so you'll get ferritin, total iron, and then transferritin, total iron binding capacity. In fact, I would say we don't even use hemoglobin as a reading for iron deficiency in Australia. That would just be a backup to say, oh yes, iron says you're anemic and you've got low hemoglobin as well. And we would look at macrocytic and microcytic cells and looking at cell size as well. But yeah, no, hemoglobin's not one we commonly use. It's just a backup. So that's so fascinating that you guys use
so it. across countries, different practice, which I think is super important. So in the States, hemoglobin is like, everyone gets hemoglobin drawn pretty much all the time. But they don't always get a full iron study like you talked about. And so for our patients in the state, this is something we often will request. And if you feel like you're tired and it's been dismissed, oh, your hemoglobin is normal, you're fine, you can ask for an iron study. Can I just do a full anemia workup where you get what you said, a ferritin, a TIBC, a transferrin saturation, a TSAT. You want to get all of those labs because you want to look at them, because it'll help you identify if you're truly anemic, and are you iron deficient anemic, or are you are you B12 anemic? Like, what kind of anemia do you actually have? So that's why I just think you have to get the full set of labs on anemia to really dig into it. So in the States, if you're watching this from the States, if your fatigue and tiredness has just been dismissed and like, you're not anemic, hemoglobin's normal, you just have kidney disease, that's why you're tired. No, like, don't let that be the end of the story. Get a full iron panel so you can really make sure that you're not iron deficient, because that's so easy. It's so easy to fix. It really is so easy to fix. And then from there, what we like to look at is we do like to look at ferritin. We like to look at the TSAT. Those are a couple that we'll really hone in on to see, what are the trends? Are they really deficient or not?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because in Australia, a bit like the hemoglobin, we can get iron. So for instance, I got this really crazy virus when I'd come out of hospital from a broken hip, and my iron levels and hemoglobin were normal, but my ferritin was 2. So it was And in Australia, I don't know what your reference range is there. I know over 30 is normal. We like it over 50. I say anything less than 50 is anemia. And that's it's the ferritin level that we look at. So yeah, it was interesting. So my GP, who's very good, is like, well, you're on transfusion levels. And I said, yeah. And we just knew it was the virus had just chomped through and all the inflammation that you spoke about. So I found that interesting, but my iron was completely normal and my hemoglobin was normal. It's like the body almost had upregulated to carry more oxygen to try and heal. But if that had gotten missed long term, I would have crashed into a very low anemia, because my stores had completely gone into nothing.
Yes, and I think that's a good point, just to define that better. Ferritin is really like your deep stores, right? That's your stores of iron. And so you can have, the body's always moving things where it needs to go. It carries a lot of things intracellularly. It carries, it carries its stores. It doesn't want to, get stuck without anything. So in the case of, in your case, you had a virus. Viruses, really pathogens of any sort, they're going to just eat up the iron, like you said. In your case, you had a pathogen, so it sent out your extra stores to, probably compensate for where now the iron levels were dropping, to get oxygen into your body. And so you were right, your stores were totally gone. And if you wouldn't have caught up on that, which again, like for you, you're like, oh, okay, well, I know how I can take care of this. You took care of it, it didn't end up becoming a problem. But in other cases, if that hadn't been caught, you're right. And because you didn't have a full picture of what was going on with your iron stores and anemia, in 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, you'd be like, oh, like I can't think straight anymore. I'm so tired. Like I must be getting sick again. And you would just be deficient in iron.
Yeah. And I think here's a really good place, maybe if you want to explain the difference between iron deficient anemia versus B, because people often don't realize, people just hear anemia and they think it's iron. But of course, B12 plays exactly the same role, and then the difference between microcytic and macrocytic cells. So that gives you an idea whether it's B12 or iron, because B12 deficiency will often mimic an iron deficiency, and often that gets missed too because people are just looking at iron. So do you want to explain that one?
Yes. Okay, so you're going to have to pause the video here and edit it because I cannot explain this off the top of my head.
That's okay. I can if you want me to, but I guess
the graphic if you want me to explain this real quick, or we can cut this piece.
I can explain if you want. So the
okay.
blood cells have to be a certain size to squeeze through capillaries, and it's the squeezing through the capillaries.
I'll let you explain it, and I'll just agree with you.
All right. It's the squeezing through the capillaries is where the red blood cell delivers the oxygen. So if it's the right size, when it goes through the capillary, it's the squeezing, and that releases the oxygen into the capillary. In iron deficient anemia, the red blood cells get too small. So they go whizzing through the capillaries and they don't drop off the oxygen. And in B12 deficiency, the cells get too big. The red blood cells are too big. They fold in half to squeeze through the capillaries, and the folding in half, they're covering the oxygen. So as it goes through, it can't deliver it. So red blood cells are oxygen carriers. It's the squeezing mechanism through the capillaries that releases the oxygen. In iron deficiency, the red blood cells get too small. And in B12 deficiency, the red blood cells get too big. So we've got microscopic, which is iron deficient anemia, and macrocytic, B12 deficient anemia. And really, on it's on a full blood examination, they'll make a comment, cells appear microcytic, cells appear macrocytic, and it's under all the hemoglobin readings. They'll have total hemoglobin concentration and all of it. And those are where you can tell whether it's B12 or iron. And then, of course, if you're a really good doctor or a physician, you're asking for B12 as well, just to make sure that that's not the case. But in kidney disease, my understanding is it's more likely to be an iron deficient anemia versus a B12. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And that, I have to say, I love that description. That was one of the best I've ever heard of like just practically how it works. So yeah, most likely iron deficiency anemia. But again, the reason why I think you'd look at both, especially if you've changed your diet recently, is number one, like on the B12 side, sometimes people don't realize that they don't even metabolize B12 correctly. So they've been taking a supplement, but it's the wrong kind. And they're like, they just got all this unused, useless B12 that they're like just in their body or just peed out, and they can't use it, and they can be B12 deficient and still taking a supplement. Other times people have shifted their diet so much that they're not getting a lot of B12, and so just by virtue of just not having it, they don't have it. It's very rich in animal products and not so much in plant products, and so B12 is definitely one I think is a good idea to keep on your radar, especially if you've changed your diet.
And I think, yeah, no, I totally agree, because the iron-rich foods and B12-rich foods, they are slightly different, but like you say, they're animal protein. So that brings me to the next question. If you are going to change your diet, are there foods that you can include to make sure that you're potentially getting more iron and B12 in your diet even if you want to be plant-based and more alkaline, and all the things that we speak about that are really amazing for kidney disease. And the research does show that these things are really important. But how would you incorporate maybe iron or B12 rich foods into your diet, eating basically a plant-based diet?
Yeah, great. Okay, so I have a handout like always to share.
Hey, everybody loves your handouts, by the way. We always get amazing questions and comments about them.
So we have on our website a really short, it's kind of a mini like jumpstart on kidney disease. We talk about anemia on that. It's called Kidney Nutrition Answer. So it's like 10 to 15 minute videos, and then just dig into some of these pieces. And this is in there as well. So one thing is that I'm going to share with you about iron. Meat is really, really dense in iron in particular, but a lot of people have cut way back on meat or have gone vegan. So I want to share with you plant options as well. And we have a lot of patients that part of their plan is to be fully plant-based or very, very plant dominant. And so this is why this nutrient is on our radar. So of course, as you can see on this, high iron foods, and on the meats, you can see, you know, just for example, beef, 1.4 to 3.3 milligrams for a 2.5 ounce serving. So, I mean, that's not a very big portion for quite a bit of iron in a day. It's dependent on the person, but, you know, we're aiming for, you know, around 12-ish milligrams or so for women, especially if you're still menstruating, up to 18. If you have a really heavy menstrual cycle, you would need even more. So you lose quite a bit in menstruation. So, but just, I wanted to give this picture of how dense meat is comparative to some of the other products. It's not that you have to include meat for sure, but it's just one of the very rich sources of it. So if you look at some of your plant sources, right, these are actually still quite rich. So lentils, wow. Yeah, so comparative to beef, right, 3.3 milligrams for 2.5 ounces. You know, 3/4 cup of lentils is about 4 to 5 milligrams, so quite a bit in lentils. So if you're struggling with anemia and you do like a nice like lentil soup, that's great. I like to make lentil patties. They're super easy. I like lentils because they're quick and easy. It's like one of the only beans, doesn't take you hours to cook. But even chickpeas or tempeh, these are all very, very rich in iron. Soybeans, you know, 6.5 milligrams for about 3/4, half a cup. So there are grains that hold iron. Some people like to use some of the grain products in the US, they've added iron to them. So like cream of wheat or wheat farina in the States is it's very, very rich in iron. We used to do an experiment in school where we would either grind up cereal or the cream of wheat, and then we'd drag a magnet through it, and you'd pick up all the, yeah,
that's
kind of
cool.
fun. Yeah, and you could, like, you'd pull it out and you're like, whoa, like there's iron in my cereal.
That's awesome.
But I mean, wheat germ, we love using wheat germ because it has, if you're not gluten sensitive, but it's really rich in vitamin E. It's got a lot of other good minerals. 2 tablespoons is about 1.25 milligrams. So it's easy if you have some applesauce, sprinkle some wheat germ on it, or if you put a little bit in your yogurt. Blackstrap molasses is not just molasses, blackstrap, very, very rich in iron also. That's one we use. We have a couple of recipes. We have like a power bite where you mix up dates and ginger and blackstrap molasses, a couple other things, roll it in a ball. Then people just keep them in their fridge, and we use, you know, food as medicine. So rather than an iron tablet, they'll make the power bites every week. We have one that's a gingerbread flavor, and they really love that.
Yummy.
And they'll eat, you know, that for a little snack. You know, teff is an alternative grain, as is amaranth, but both of them are very rich in iron. And then on vegetables can be a great source of iron. It's a slightly different kind of iron, considered non-heme. So it's not absorbed quite as well, but you still get quite a bit. So snow peas they're actually very high in vitamin C, which we'll talk about in a second, and iron. So I think they're kind of a magical food. Kale has a lot. Green peas, again, like that lentil legume, has a lot of iron in it. Pepitas, we use a lot of pepitas, or sesame seeds, or just nuts in general can have quite a few outside of peanuts. So those are some of your high iron foods that you could look at consuming.
Amazing. Okay. I was going to say, what else
Then,
down there?
yeah, so what else is below here? So
Yeah.
here's a trick, is that vitamin C enhances your absorption of iron, right? I love vitamin C. It's great for many things, but enhances your absorption of iron. So if you just eat like your cream of wheat, just plain cream of wheat, you know, whatever, you won't absorb as much of that iron as if you had it with, like, say, a few tangerine slices or a few strawberries. So knowing some of the good rich vitamin C sources, and if you can pair them, you can get a little bit better iron absorption. So it's one of the tricks that we use. So high vitamin C foods. We always think of orange juice and oranges, right? Everyone's like, oh, vitamin C, like you're sick, like eat oranges or drink orange juice. So oranges, I'm just going to share with you. So we'll just do clementine. So one little clementine is about 36 milligrams. Even orange juice is like 60 milligrams or so. So red peppers, just for a half a cup raw, it's like 100 to 140 milligrams.
Wow.
So like twice as much as orange juice. Green peppers, 60 milligrams, same as orange juice. Broccoli, quite rich in iron as well. Snow peas, as I say, snow peas are like high in iron, high in vitamin C. You can put them in a stir fry, really great for both. Cabbage is actually very rich in vitamin C. Kale's high in iron and vitamin C, great food. Brussels sprouts, sweet potato, asparagus. So there's lots of vegetables that have a lot of vitamin C in them as well, not just orange juice. If you want a fruit, strawberries, that's one of my main defaults, because if people have a potassium restriction, if they need that, strawberries are potassium, they're high in vitamin C, they pair with tons of great things. Pineapple, those can be good. Clementine, guava nectar. But check this out. So guava, which is actually one of my favorite foods, 200 milligrams for one little fruit.
Wow.
Vitamin C. So that's very, very rich, much richer than an orange, right? Papaya has a lot. Kiwi has quite a bit. I know you love kiwis, especially we've talked about that before. Kiwis are wonderful. Cantaloupe, mango. So it gives you a few options to think about how you're going to pair it, and then just, some ideas of how people might pair these together. Blackstrap molasses has a lot of iron, and it actually tastes really good drizzled over a sweet potato, which is a lot of vitamin C.
Really?
Right?
I've never tried that one.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, in the States, people like the brown sugar taste with sweet potatoes. Blackstrap molasses can really mimic that. I think it tastes really good. I like the bitterness of blackstrap molasses. Cream of wheat and strawberries, like we talked about, dried mango, apricots. And then a lot of my patients will use, they'll cook in a cast iron skillet, because you leach out some of the iron. They don't have to add anything to their diet. They just switch how they cook. Or they'll use these lucky iron fish, which we love these. Just drop them in your soup. You can make iron ice, is what I call it, where you boil the lucky iron fish in some water, and then you use that water to make ice cubes. So a lot of ways that you can get some iron in. And then just a couple quick meal ideas. Just for example, a Greek salad, right? It has chickpeas and olives and red peppers and like spinach or lettuce. You have a good iron vitamin C combo, because you have the chickpeas high in iron, peppers high in vitamin C, like such a great dynamic meal that you can have. So, broccoli quiche, lots of good things you can do. Eggs are rich in iron with that yolk. Broccoli's rich in vitamin C. So amazing. Just a couple ideas there.
That's great ideas. Fantastic. And so when you're treating someone, do you prefer to do it through the diet, or would you supplement? What is your preference there? And what have you noticed works better?
Yeah, so it depends how anemic they are, like how much. So if they are quite anemic, if their ferritin was 2, like you, we would use a supplement along with diet, because I want to build those stores up really quickly. So otherwise, we proactively make sure we just don't get anemia. So if we know that we're changing the diet, we proactively will add in, using a cast iron skillet, etc. Or if they're just mildly anemic, like they're like, I'm feeling kind of tired, we run some labs or don't run labs, we're just like, well, let's add some more iron in their food. We can often treat anemia just with diet. It's really, really effective if you're mildly anemic. If you're moderate or quite extensively anemic, I think it's a good idea just to get a good supplement on board. We usually will use iron bisglycinate rather than ferrous sulfate, which is the default in the States. So we'll just use the iron bisglycinate because it's real gentle on the tummy and well absorbed.
And so that was my next question. A lot of people that take iron supplements find they get really constipated. So how do you get around that? Like Ferrosorb is the big supplement here in Australia, but it's constipating. So yeah, how do you get around that with patients?
Yeah, see, I jumped the gun. So, I mean, number one, you get on the right form because there's a lot of different types of iron out there, and some of them are extremely constipating. And they even just make people's stomach hurt. And they're like, I have to take it. The doctor prescribed it. You often can just get a different form, like the iron bisglycinate. We have used for some of our patients, oh shoot, no, I'm forgetting what it's called. It'll come back to me in a minute, but it's a liquid food-based supplement that is high in iron.
Ferrofluoridex. Do you have that?
Yes, Floridix. That's it. Floridix. We use Floridix. I like Floridix. I think it's got a lot of great components in it. So we'll use that for some of our patients also, and that works really well. But the first thing is change your type of iron. Make sure one that's gentle on your tummy. And then number two, if you still don't feel like it's resolved, which for me has happened never, to tell you the truth, like once we change the type of iron, the problem resolves. But if you can't, then sometimes just moving your iron with your meals instead of in between your meals can help resolve that issue. But a lot of times it's just changing the type of iron that you're getting.
Great. Okay. And then are there anything else that will cause iron deficiency? So is it just having kidney disease, or how is that mechanism working in kidney disease that potentially you're going to have a lower amount of iron? Is it the medications they're on? Is it what is that whole process?
So there can be medications. I mean, some of the big medications are usually taken off. So NSAIDs you shouldn't be on anyways if you have kidney disease, ibuprofen, Advil, etc. You shouldn't be on those anyways, but if you are, can cause anemia. If you've had a serious infection, so you talked about how for yourself personally, you got a bad virus, but you've had an infection and been on a lot of antibiotics, not only will the infection cause some anemia because most pathogens love iron, but antibiotics also can contribute to anemia as well. So those would be another couple things. And I actually see antibiotics used pretty regularly with my patients. So those could also cause some anemia that you'd want to watch out for.
Okay, great. All right. What else do we need to say about anemia and kidney disease? Is there anything else that I've missed or we haven't covered that you think people need to know?
I think probably as a recap is that it's easy to change, right? You just get the labs done. If you have chronic kidney disease, you haven't had a full iron panel in a while, at least like once a year, you should get that and keep tabs on, what's going on. I think that is a prudent thing to do, is to at least once a year, probably even if you don't have kidney disease, it's good to keep a tab on that. But even if you don't have kidney disease, once a year, get an iron panel or iron study, as you would call it, and then make sure you have all the labs. So you have a baseline, and you can also see if things start to trend down. Because like I said, it's so easy to fix with your food. That would be a couple of things that I would very heavily emphasize. The other thing that I would emphasize is that if you're moving towards a plant-based diet, which we love those, I think they're fantastic, but if you're moving towards a plant-based diet, then make sure that you're considerate and conscientious of adding in some of those mineral-rich, iron-rich foods into your diet, because it's super easy to get a hole, and 3 to 6 months, you're like, man, why do I feel so run down? But you can just put it in your diet. Sesame seeds, some of the nuts, the pepitas, the snow peas, all those things can really add those minerals into your diet without having a lot of meat.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I love those. I haven't used them myself, but maybe I should. I've got a couple of patients that were using the iron fish and things like that in their cooking, and they rave about them. So yeah,
I love them. They're easy. They're cute.
Yeah.
I like the company themselves. They have a good cause behind them. And so I just think it's really, really a great tool.
And well, I don't know if we'll get this out before Christmas, but a great Christmas gift to get people those little fish, huh?
Yes, put it as a good stocking stuffer.
Exactly. All right, Jessianna, anything else we need to cover or add in there? If we covered all things iron, anemia, and B12.
I think the only other one that I think you can probably speak to better than me is, what herbals or what products people might be looking at, what teas they could use that might be able to help out with anemia as well, or maybe some things that you guys use.
Yeah, look, nettle tea is naturally very rich in anemia, in iron. So that's and vitamin C. So it's one of my favorites for that, because it does naturally have that content in there. Then there's dong quai, the herb, which we call a nutrifying tonic. One of the things that I like to do is bone broth, where you just cook with the bone but take it out. So you're not eating the meat, but you're getting the bone marrow into the soups and stews. So you make it like a big vegetable soup, dump a beef bone or something in it that's got the bone marrow in there, and then you pull it out, because that will get all those nutrifying nutrients in there. Nutrifying nutrients, I think I just made a word up, but it'll get all those really rich minerals and things into the soup without you making it a really meaty dish and things like that. So that's what we do. But nettle tea is probably my go-to, and like you say, vitamin C, making sure you're getting in there. And then of course, as something Jessianna and I would always do in clinic, is to treat the cause. So you want to find out why someone's anemic. Is it just the dietary shift?
What we didn't talk about.
Yeah, sometimes it can be people have got food allergies, so they've got microbleeding through the gut, or really heavy, you did mention really heavy menstruation, or periods and things like that. Sometimes people are really just deficient in molybdenum. Molybdenum is needed for some. It's a rare type. If iron anemia doesn't respond to anything else, it can just be a mineral deficiency in molybdenum. Anything else you've noticed that really contributes? It's really the heavy menstrual bleeding and the gut issues are the two big causes that I would see for people having ongoing low iron that's not related to just a dietary change. Is there anything else that you see in that?
Sometimes zinc. Yeah, we'll see that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that is another one. So yeah, so there'd be the other things to look at if people don't respond to the simple dietary changes and things like that. And then, as you mentioned, just making sure people getting their blood panels done. I like sort of twice a year, just to keep an eye on that. So
easy. It's so easy. It's a low-hanging fruit to just you've optimized everything you can for your diet.
Yeah. No, and I love those handouts. So if you want to find out what Jessianna was talking about with the handouts and those 5-minute videos, if you go to kidneynutritionalinstitute.org, kidneynutritioninstitute.org, and I'll put that in the show notes below. And then I think, is it on the community page tab?
You can if you just click on work with us and scroll down, you'll see that it's right in there. Kidney Nutrition Answers course, one of our 2 options. So it's I think it's priced at $37 right now. Super easy. Amazing. Lots of good tools that you can use in there.
Okay. So I highly recommend doing that, because not only that do you get access to some great videos and content and things like that, but you'll get introduced to Jessianna and her team. And I think whenever you're changing diet and working with those things, it's really important to work with a professional that can check that sort of stuff for you, because while you go, okay, I've gone plant-based and I'm going to get iron back in there, you've got to make sure that your B12 has been addressed, and zinc, as we spoke about. And, it's really nice to have, even, myself as a professional, I always have someone else just check over my diet, because you don't know what you don't know. And also you get used to the tastes and things that you like. And so sometimes you can be naturally creating deficiencies just through tastes, seasonal sort of stuff, just things you do and don't like. For me, I do quick, simple meals. So I'm a stir fry kind of smoothie girl. I've got my smoothie in my jar here that I'm making my way through. So just, yeah, just things like that. So having someone that can say, well, maybe just add some nuts in there, or do this or do that, or some black starch molasses over your sweet potato, which I have never done. Yeah, so if you want to work with anyone from Jessianna's team, go and have a look at kni.org, and I will put all the information down below so you can contact her. Jessianna, thank you so much for joining us. Again, I always appreciate your time and your knowledge and your passion for really helping people with kidney disease through really simple but powerful ways, and just, I don't know, keeping up with the latest research and just being so genuine. And, you meet people who genuinely care about their patients, and that is you. So, yeah, it's really nice. So I'm just grateful to have you as part of our resource team. So I think we feel very blessed, and people have been loving the videos, by the way. So we've got some really great comments.
Awesome. Good.
All right, guys. And if you want to know more about what we do, head to www.kidneycoach.com. You can find out about the Kidney Disease Solution Program there, and our supplements on Kygenesis. We've got a few there as well. Remember to hit subscribe. That way you'll get notified anytime we put up a new video. And thank you for being part of our community. We look forward to seeing you next time. And Jessianna, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.